Liam's phone buzzed, and at first he thought it was just another notification. But when he opened it, he froze. The screen showed a photo that made his stomach drop. His family was there, standing together, smiling under a brilliant Icelandic sky. Snow dusted the peaks behind them, golden light spilling across the landscape. The caption on the post made his chest tighten. "Best family trip ever." The words, simple as they were, hit like a punch. They were meant to be joyful, to show happiness, but to Liam, they felt like a declaration of war, a reminder that he had been left behind. He stared at the photo, scrolling slowly through the pictures. His mother and father looked relaxed, laughing, with Maya, his cousin, who was at the center of every frame. They all looked connected, a perfect group, perfectly happy without him. He had asked about the holiday weeks ago, and everyone had brushed him off. "We're keeping it simple this year," his mother said. "Money's tight," his father added. Maya had smiled and asked if he had plans, pretending everything was normal. Now he understood. They hadn't forgotten him by accident. They had deliberately chosen to leave him out. A strange emptiness settled in his chest, a hollow feeling that swallowed him from the inside. He had expected disappointment, sure, but this was different. It wasn't just missing out on a trip, it was the realization that he didn't matter in the way he thought he did. For years, his family had compared him to Maya. She was always the golden child, disciplined, predictable, the one they celebrated. Liam tried hard too, but his successes never seemed enough. He had always felt in the shadows, and now the trip was proof. They had rewarded Maya and excluded him and the photos, with their way of showing him he was invisible. The betrayal was sharp. His chest tightened, and his hands shook slightly as he swiped through more images. Them at waterfalls, bundled up in scarves, laughing in hot springs. He could almost hear their laughter through the screen, mocking him silently. Each picture was a reminder of what he had lost. Not money, not convenience, but love, attention, acknowledgement. The hollow feeling inside him began to twist into something heavier. Anger. A need for something he couldn't quite name yet. He thought back to the conversations before the trip. He remembered asking if he could go, if the family had plans, and each answer had been carefully measured to avoid confrontation. They had lied, or at least manipulated the truth. They had used politeness to cover their betrayal, pretending there was no choice when there clearly had been one. And Maya's smile when she asked about his plans now seemed like mockery. She hadn't done it openly, but her words had the sting of deceit. She had known, and she had kept it from him. Liam's thoughts spun. He remembered nights lying awake, thinking about family trips they had taken when he was younger. He had always been present then, included, part of the group. He remembered standing at the edge of waterfalls, catching snowflakes on his tongue, laughing at jokes he barely understood, feeling that he belonged. And now, that belonging had vanished. In its place, a sharp, gnawing pain settled. The photos weren't just images, they were proof of exclusion, of rejection, of being invisible to the people he loved most. At first, he didn't feel anger, only emptiness, the kind that makes your limbs heavy and your thoughts slow. He could barely move, staring at the phone, imagining how they must have felt laughing together, sharing jokes, planning meals, exploring places he had dreamed of visiting. The thought of Iceland, of glaciers and geysers, of the magical landscapes he had imagined visiting, was now tainted. The dream had been claimed without him, stolen by their decision to leave him out. Every picture was a knife in his chest as the minutes ticked by. Emptiness shifted into something else. It was sharper now. Anger began to rise, mixing with the hurt, forming a determination that was quiet but firm. He replayed the moments in his head, trying to understand why they would do this. Was it carelessness? Favoritism? Or had it been deliberate? The more he thought, the more it felt personal. And as the feeling grew, it began to take shape into a thought he couldn't ignore. A quiet, whispering idea that echoed in his mind. Make them regret it. He didn't act immediately. He didn't storm into the house or shout at Maya when she walked past him, pretending all was normal. Instead, he watched, silently, feeling the weight of the injustice. Each glance at the screen, each post, each laugh shared in photos and videos, fueled a storm inside him. It was no longer just about Iceland. It was about recognition, about respect, about being seen. They had underestimated him. They had assumed he would take it quietly. His room became a sanctuary where he processed everything. He replayed memories, old conversations, moments where he had felt overlooked, unnoticed, undervalued. They all came together now, forming a clear picture. His family's choices, their favoritism toward Maya, the way he had been pushed aside. It wasn't a single incident. It was a pattern. And the Iceland trip was the culmination. They had built their perfect vacation on the foundation of ignoring him. And now, with the photos, they were showing him that perfection without him. Liam's mind worked fast. Ideas came and went, some fleeting, some lingering. What could he do? Confront them? Ignore them? Make them feel the pain he felt? Each option carried weight. He thought about fairness, justice, about giving them a taste of their own cruelty. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming something they had taken from him. Attention, recognition, his place in the family. He needed them to see him. As night fell, Liam stared at the ceiling, the room, dark except for the glow of his phone. The photos of Iceland still lingered on the screen, vivid and mocking. But now, they were different. They were no longer just images. They were a spark, a challenge, a question that demanded an answer. What would he do next? The betrayal had opened a door inside him, one that led into a world of choices he hadn't faced before. And for the first time in years, he felt something alive. Something sharp and undeniable, a plan forming, quiet and precise, fueled by the injustice he had endured. By the end of the night, Liam made a silent promise to himself. He wouldn't let this go unnoticed. He wouldn't let the betrayal define him. Something would change, though he didn't yet know what. The Iceland trip had been stolen, but he could still reclaim power in the aftermath. The hollow feeling in his chest had transformed into focus, and focus, he realized, could become a weapon far stronger than anger alone. As the first rays of morning light seeped through the blinds, Liam felt a mix of determination and apprehension. He was no longer the invisible one, the forgotten child. He had been wronged, yes, but now he had something else. Clarity. He would act. How? When, or in what way? He didn't know yet, but one thing was certain. Nothing would be the same again. The betrayal had planted a seed and it was growing fast, ready to burst into the world. And in that quiet morning, Liam understood the truth. Revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about reclaiming himself, taking back control, making sure that being ignored and hurt was no longer an option. The Iceland trip had been the spark, but the fire, it was only just beginning. The days after the Iceland coast were the hardest Liam had faced in a long time. He walked through school like a shadow, silent and careful, avoiding the glances of classmates and teachers alike. Everyone seemed to move around him, but he barely. noticed. Mind was consumed by the images on his phone. The laughter frozen in time. The smiles that didn't include him. Each picture replayed in his head, over and over, as if demanding an answer he didn't yet have. The more he thought about it, the more the anger grew, simmering under the surface. It wasn't loud at first, just a quiet ache. But it was persistent. It followed him to every class, every hallway, every conversation he pretended to have at home. The tension was even thicker. His parents tried to act as if nothing had happened, offering small gestures. His mom leaving a souvenir mug on his desk, his dad asking perfunctory questions about school, but they were empty. Liam felt them, saw through them, and rejected them silently. Maya walked past him, her eyes flicking away the moment she noticed his stare. The house felt colder than ever, and every room reminded him of what he had been denied. Every laugh in the living room, every shared memory they tried to relive with him. It was a performance, and he was on the outside. Liam began to think about revenge. Not the dramatic, movie-style revenge he had imagined in the past, but something sharper, more effective. Something that would make them understand what it felt like to be ignored, dismissed, overlooked. The images on his phone weren't just photos, they were evidence. Proof that they had made a choice and left him behind. But how could he make them truly feel that? He didn't want a petty argument. He wanted a lasting impression. He wanted them to see that their actions had consequences. He started small. He withdrew from the household. He stopped helping with chores, stopped volunteering for family tasks. He stopped laughing at jokes he didn't find funny. Stopped pretending that everything was okay. At first it was subtle. He kept his distance, offered only short replies, and spent more time alone. But even small actions carried weight. The absence of someone who was always present became noticeable quickly. The house, once lively and chaotic, seemed emptier. His parents noticed it immediately, though they didn't realize the reason. First, Liam felt a strange sense of power in that withdrawal. For years, he had been the one who adapted, who compromised, who tried to fit in. Now he was in control. Each moment of silence, each step back was a message. They had ignored him, so he would make his absence felt. He watched how they reacted, carefully noting their confusion, their guilt, their unspoken frustration. He wasn't cruel, at least, not overtly, but he was precise. Every glance they gave him, every hesitant word, reinforced the truth he had been living with. He mattered, and they had forgotten that as the days passed. Liam's mind wrestled with another question. Should he confront them directly, or continue to withdraw until the tension broke on its own? He remembered the advice he had read online, the stories people told about revenge. Some said to strike hard and fast, to make people feel the pain they caused. Others said patience was more powerful, letting the offender feel the weight of their own actions over time. Liam chose the latter. He wanted more than anger. He wanted recognition. Quick retaliation would satisfy him for a moment, but he wanted a lasting effect, something that would linger in their minds and force them to see. At school, he channeled some of his energy into himself. He focused on grades, on sports, on friends who appreciated him. He started running longer in the mornings, pushing his limits, and felt stronger for it. Each accomplishment, each small victory, was a reminder that he didn't need their validation to feel whole, but he still felt the pull of revenge, the desire to make them regret excluding him. It wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about reclaiming his place in the family, demanding recognition in a way that words alone couldn't convey. One evening, as he sat in his room scrolling through the Iceland pictures again, he realized something important. Revenge wasn't about anger. It was about control. By withdrawing, by creating a void where he used to be present, he was already executing a subtle form of it. They didn't see it yet, but their discomfort was growing. Every unanswered question, every awkward silence, every moment of guilt. They felt without knowing why it was all part of the plan. He smiled slightly at the thought. He wasn't reckless. He was deliberate, and deliberate always had more impact than impulsive. Then came the night. His parents finally noticed the full extent of his withdrawal. His mother asked directly, "Why are you shutting us out?" His father added, "You've been distant. Liam, talk to us." It was the confrontation he had anticipated, but he felt ready. He didn't respond with anger or tears. He responded with clarity. He told them everything: the hurt, the betrayal, the sense of being invisible, the longing to be included. He spoke carefully, measured his words, letting each one land like a pebble dropped into still water. His mother's face went pale. His father's gaze dropped. Maya froze, caught off guard by the intensity of his honesty. For the first time, Liam saw something shift. He realized that confrontation didn't have to be dramatic to be effective. It didn't have to be loud or mean-spirited. It just had to be true. The truth was sharper than any anger could ever be. And as he spoke, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Not completely, but enough to see a path forward. Afterward, Liam thought about the next steps. He could still strike further, punish them with silence or resentment, make them feel the full weight of their error. But he hesitated. The images on his phone, the empty feelings in his chest, and the apology that was starting to form in their eyes. They reminded him that revenge could be a trap. It could feel satisfying for a moment, but in the end, it only deepened the pain. Instead, he focused on boundaries. He decided that the next phase of his plan wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming his identity, making his presence in the family something they had to recognize naturally. He would not disappear from their lives entirely, but he would no longer allow himself to be invisible. The strategy was simple: presence with limits, honesty without bitterness, and patience. The Iceland trip had been a lesson, a catalyst. Now it was his turn to define the family dynamic. On his terms, Liam felt a new sense of clarity. The anger and hurt were still there, but they no longer controlled him. He had channeled them into focus, into deliberate action. The house felt tense, yes, but that tension was no longer a weight pressing on him. It was a reflection of the shift he had created. He had become a force they could not ignore, not through aggression, but through presence, silence, and honesty. By the end of the week, Liam's family had begun to notice the difference. Small gestures, hesitant questions, tentative conversations, glances filled with uncertainty showed that his absence had power. It was not cruel power, but it was effective. And Liam felt a strange satisfaction, not from revenge itself, but from the realization that he had agency. He was no longer the passive victim of their choices. He was active, deliberate, and in control of how he engaged with them moving forward. The struggle had taught him something essential. Revenge didn't have to be violent or dramatic to be real. The subtle shifts, the silent withdrawals, the careful honesty, they carried more impact than shouting or retaliation ever could. Liam was learning that emotional intelligence and self-awareness could be far more effective than blind anger. And while the Iceland trip still stung, it no longer defined him. He knew the next challenge would be the hardest. Deciding whether to fully confront them, to reclaim his place openly, or to continue the silent strategy he had started. Either way, he had grown. The anger had sharpened him. but the clarity had transformed him. Liam realized that revenge was not just about making others feel pain. It was about understanding the consequences of their actions, asserting himself, and deciding who he wanted to be in the aftermath. By the time he lay in bed that night, Liam understood the full weight of his struggle. He was no longer helpless. He was no longer invisible. The Iceland trip had been a betrayal, yes, but it had also been an opportunity, and he intended to use it. The storm inside him was no longer chaotic, it was focused, deliberate, a quiet fire that would guide his choices. Whether his family understood it fully or not, Liam was changing the rules. He would not be ignored. He would not be dismissed. And when the time came for the final decision, he would face it with clarity, control, and the knowledge that he had already reclaimed something far more powerful than revenge: himself. The weekend arrived, and Liam knew the moment of truth had come. His aunt had invited the family to dinner, a gathering that promised normalcy, but also held the potential for confrontation. Everyone expected him to decline. After all, he had been distant, cold, and silent for weeks. But Liam wasn't running away. He had spent too long inside his own thoughts, letting the Iceland trip and the betrayal fester into plans, strategies, and emotional calculations. This dinner was the moment he had been preparing for. As he entered the house, the atmosphere was different from usual. Conversations faltered as he walked past the living room. His family glanced at him, their expressions mixed curiosity, guilt, uncertainty. Maya avoided his eyes, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she shifted uneasily under his gaze. The room felt heavy, charged with unsaid words. Liam knew he could either let the silence crush him, let the tension intimidate him, or he could take control. He chose control. Dinner began, and the family tried to act normal. They laughed at small jokes, poured drinks, and passed dishes, but the unease was palpable. Liam kept his composure, responding politely but minimally, letting the absence of his usual warmth speak volumes. He observed their reactions carefully, noting each glance, each slight pause, each flicker of guilt in their eyes. He realized that his withdrawal over the past weeks had already accomplished what he wanted. They were noticing him, truly noticing him, in ways they hadn't before. Halfway through the meal, the tension reached a breaking point. His aunt, usually the peacemaker, sighed softly. "I should have insisted you come with us," she admitted, voice quiet but firm. "It wasn't fair to leave you out." The words were small, almost understated, but they carried weight. Liam felt a ripple of surprise. Apologies were rare in his family. Sincere ones were even rarer. And yet here it was, placed carefully on the table, a seed of acknowledgement he hadn't expected. His mother followed, voice trembling slightly, almost whispering. I didn't think you'd enjoy the trip. I was wrong." His father's eyes dropped, his usual confident posture faltering. And Maya, who had been watching him nervously, finally met his gaze, guilt creeping into her expression. The room fell silent, but not the suffocating silence of conflict. It was a quiet space, charged with emotion and honesty. Liam could feel it all, the tension, the regret, the weight of their awareness. For a moment, he considered what he had been planning for weeks. He could still withdraw completely, remain cold, make them feel the sting of their betrayal. He could let anger guide him, let resentment dominate, and they would understand finally the depth of the pain they had caused. It would be satisfying, in the way revenge always is for a brief moment. But as he looked at them, truly looked, he realized something vital. Revenge might satisfy a momentary craving, but it would never heal him. It would never rebuild trust. It would only prolong the pain, for him and for them. Instead, Liam chose honesty over retaliation. He spoke calmly, clearly, letting each word land like a stone in still water. He explained how he had felt ignored, dismissed, excluded. He described the hollow ache that had followed him for weeks, the bitterness he had carried in silence. He spoke without accusation, without shouting, without letting anger control his voice. And as he spoke, he felt the tension shift. This wasn't revenge. It was reclaiming his place, making his emotions visible, giving the family a chance to truly see him. The reactions were immediate. His mother's eyes welled with tears. His father's jaw tightened, and Maya's hands fidgeted nervously in her lap. None of them interrupted. None tried to justify their actions. They simply listened, absorbing his words, processing the depth of his hurt. It was a powerful moment. Liam realized that true influence didn't come from anger or spite. It came from clarity, courage, and vulnerability. By expressing himself honestly, he was creating change without destroying relationships. Once he had spoken, a new space opened. In the room, the family began to respond, slowly, carefully. Apologies were offered, tentative but sincere. They admitted mistakes, recognized the pain they had caused, and asked questions that showed genuine interest in his feelings. Liam listened, weighing each word, feeling the impact of the acknowledgement. It was not instant forgiveness, but it was the first step, and it felt heavier, more real, and more satisfying than any act of revenge ever could. As the evening progressed, Liam found himself making decisions he had never imagined possible a few weeks ago. He could enforce boundaries without hostility. He could demand respect without anger. He could assert his place in the family without tearing anyone down. The Iceland trip, which had started as a source of pain, had become a catalyst for transformation. It forced him to confront betrayal, grapple with anger, and choose a path that prioritized his own integrity and emotional health. By the end of the dinner, Liam felt something shift inside him. The hollow emptiness, the simmering anger, the desire. For revenge they were still there, faintly, but they no longer dictated his actions. He realized that revenge was a trap, a temporary relief that left nothing lasting but bitterness. What he had done instead, spoken the truth, set boundaries, demanded acknowledgement, was far more powerful. It created awareness, started healing, and allowed him to reclaim agency in his life. Walking home later that night, Liam reflected on the journey he had just completed. He had entered the dinner with a plan, a strategy for emotional retaliation. He had been ready to wield his pain as a weapon, but the choice to speak, to confront honestly without hostility, had changed everything. He felt the weight of control settle on him in a way he had never experienced. He wasn't powerless. He wasn't invisible. He had carved a space for himself in the family, one that demanded recognition and respect. Liam knew the path ahead wouldn't be smooth. Trust, once fractured, takes time to rebuild. Some wounds linger. Some moments of doubt and hurt would return. But he had learned an essential lesson. Revenge might deliver a moment of satisfaction, but it never brings healing. Understanding, honesty, and courage, these were the tools that truly reshaped relationships and restored balance. For the first time since the Iceland trip, Liam felt a quiet clarity. The betrayal had been a catalyst. Yes, but it had also been an opportunity. He had discovered his own strength, his ability to confront, to demand acknowledgement, to assert boundaries without losing himself. And in that realization, he found peace, not the fleeting relief of revenge. but the deeper satisfaction of control, understanding, and growth. As he stepped into the cool night air, Liam knew that everything had changed. The Iceland trip would remain a painful memory, but it was no longer a source of power over him. He had reclaimed his voice, his agency, and his place in the family. He had learned that revenge is rarely worth the cost, and that true power lies not in punishment, but in honesty, courage, and self-respect. And with that thought, he smiled faintly. He wasn't just surviving the betrayal, he was growing stronger because of it. He had faced the crossroads, chosen wisely, and emerged on the other side with clarity, dignity, and the knowledge that he could navigate the complexities of family, hurt, and reconciliation without losing himself. The storm inside him had settled into a quiet, steady strength. And for the first time in weeks, Liam felt fully, truly alive.